enable cyber action. Firstly, through working with the defense industrial base to discover vulnerabilities on public-facing infrastructure. That's the DIB VDP. Secondly, how my organization, DICE, shares cyber threat information to the benefit of both the DIB and the DoD. Thirdly, some capabilities we have to support activity, the detection of malicious activity, and enabling the DIB response to malicious activity through Insight and DICE. And I'll share with you a recent example of how we are able to help combat ransomware. All right, so what is DC3? Once again, we are the Department of Defense Cybercrime Center. We are an Air Force organization. We are aligned under the Inspector General for the Air Force. So I'm an Air Force civilian, and TechNet tends to be pretty Army heavy. I did used to work for the Army as a civilian there at the Communications Electronics Command. Any APG folks in the house? Seriously, no one here from APG? Wow. All right, DC3 is a federal cyber center. What is that? There are a series of 7 designated federal cyber centers, and I'll describe them all shortly, each with unique roles and responsibilities in protecting this nation's critical infrastructure, and in particular, responding to cybersecurity incidents. Our role in that nexus is to enable and inform law enforcement, cybersecurity, and national security partners. By law enforcement, we are typically talking about DoD-based law enforcement. We began as a member organization of the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, and we have strong connections to OSI, to NCIS, to Army CID, DCSA, and the other LECI organizations. Cybersecurity, we have equities for both the DoD cybersecurity and defense industrial-based cybersecurity, and national security partners. We're closely engaged with CISA and a variety of other organizations. DC3 has a wide array of capabilities that it brings to bear in this fight. The origins of DC3 go back to about 1997. And around that time, those of you who remember, computers weren't quite everywhere yet. In fact, I remember interviewing for jobs and interviewing candidates for jobs then, and you could say, I think computers are the wave of the future, with a straight face, like you wouldn't get laughed out of the room. I don't know if you could pull that off right now. But in those days, there was not nearly as much understanding of the internet and computing devices as there was now. And the law enforcement organizations within the Navy and the Air Force decided, we should probably do something about this. We should probably have a lab where we can do forensics on computing devices. And that seemed like a pretty good idea. And then they said, well, we should probably train people to use the lab to do the forensics on the devices. And that seemed like a pretty good idea. So that became what we now call the Cyber Forensics Lab and the Cyber Training Academy. And those two are the foundations of DC3. Both of those organizations continue today, and I'll describe more about what they do in a minute. But that began a series of actions within that environment to move quickly, to innovate, to deliver capability, which attracted a lot of attention. So over time, additional capabilities were created in the department, and it made sense to place them at DC3, where there's a demonstrated track record for, frankly, getting things done. And secondly, synergy between all of these different abilities. So as I said earlier, we are part of a series of federal cyber centers. We've listed them all up on the slide. National Security Presidential Directive 54 identifies a series of cyber centers across the federal government, each with its own equities, each with its own authorities, each with its own role to play. We are designated as the DoD Center of Excellence for Digital and Multimedia Forensics. As I said, we began with a cyber forensics lab. We are also a Center of Excellence for Training, Research and Development, Analytics, and Vulnerability Sharing. So almost everything we do ties back to forensics and analysis in some way. Even if it's not forensics on physical devices, analysis of cyber activity and cyber events. And again, what I'll be showing you in a bit is how we integrate tightly with each other to produce results that our various directorates would not be able to get by themselves. but it innovates for us and it delivers insights that otherwise we might not have. The org chart on the far right shows that we are, again, aligned to the Air Force under the Inspector General with a very close and continuing relationship with DoD CIO as our principal staff assistant. In fact, my colleague Cynthia Carpenter is over in Theater 4. I'm going to try to shout her down across the hall. All right, so what happens in DC3 on a daily basis? As I said, we began with the lab and the training academy. And both of these are continuing concerns. We have, no kidding, a world-class cyber forensics lab in support of our primary customers, OSI, NCIS, Army CID, and a variety of other law enforcement and counterintelligence organizations across the department. We are a nationally accredited lab. Why would you have an accredited lab? So that when your investigators have to testify in a court case, they have some authority behind them, and that we can demonstrate we came to these conclusions through accredited and approved means. The lab handles a number of very technical challenges, very unique cases. Very unique cases. Everything from computers and digital forensics to a Build-A-Bear. Yes, true story. They had to go pull data off a Build-A-Bear. And the Cyber Training Academy, another one of our cornerstones here. The Cyber Training Academy trains hundreds of students every month, primarily in the DoD spaces, but also a number of international partners, and both military and civilian personnel take training. This is mostly very bespoke training. This is stuff that you're not going to get from, no offense, the folks out on the floor here. This is training designed to focus on forensics investigations in digital spaces. Training designed to focus on how to get data off a device or how to preserve a device for investigation. There is network analysis, there's cyber analysis, there's a variety of courses in support of the things agents at OSI and NCIS are going to want to do. And again, we've also trained a variety of international partners. We have agreements with over 60 countries through their ministries of defense, and so we're able to deliver digital forensics training in that capacity. I'm going to pivot down. Below that is our Information Technology Directorate, also known as our XT. It's a very Air Force thing to name things with an X. Information technology does a couple of key things for us. Firstly, of course, they enable all of the infrastructure that lets everything else happen. But secondly, that is where a lot of our tool development happens. And we have built a number of very useful tools over the years to get them put into position as key enablers for cyber forensics. One of the ones we're real proud of is called the DC3 Advanced Carver. It's one of the few cases I know of where DoD actually has a patent on a piece of technology. And the Advanced Carver is an incredible tool that pulls data from devices and media that you would think was otherwise inaccessible, whether it's been erased, whether it's been damaged, whether there has been something else that happens to it. Advanced Carver can pull things together, put them together, and reassemble them in ways that are very, very compelling. At the top right, our Vulnerability Disclosure Program. I mentioned this as a case where there was a capability that the department wanted to have. They were looking for a place to put it, and it made sense to bring it to DC3. So what happens in the VDP? Well, first of all, they run the department's Vulnerability Disclosure Program. If you remember Hack the Army, Hack the Pentagon, Hack the Air Force, all of the hack-thos, those were bug bounties. They had to pay out at the end. If you found a certain type of vulnerability with a certain severity, you might get some money from it. So SecDef at the time decided that, you know what, we need something that's enduring and probably not going to work if we have to keep paying out bounties. So what can we do that will attract the hackers of the world, the researchers of the world, and get them to look at our vulnerable infrastructure? And there was born in 2016 the Vulnerability Disclosure Program. In fact, my first encounter with this entire organization, DC3, was working for the Army, getting an email from the Vulnerability Disclosure Program saying, you have a vulnerability on your website. So what do? They work through a vendor to recruit researchers And they began by looking at websites, just websites belonging to DoD. That was so successful that they have branched out to all public infrastructure. Anything the DoD has on the internet that's facing the public is fair game. Now, often when I brief this, people get concerned. You're telling people where to look for vulnerabilities? Yes, we are, because they'll report them to us. The adversary will find them anyway. They're already in the public. The adversary won't tell you about them until it's too late. The researchers will tell us in advance. How do we know they'll do that? Because we give them safe harbor to report. Otherwise, they're committing a crime. So this is an incredibly successful program. Over 50,000 vulnerabilities have been identified, and some very high-profile systems have been mitigated and repaired. There's a number I'm going to come back to that I like a lot, and the number is 4.88 million. IBM puts out a report every year that estimates the average cost of a data breach. And last year, the average cost was 4.88 million. I won't tell you how many vulnerabilities we've closed in the DoD, but if we have found 50,000 and closed even a fraction of those, multiply that by 4.88 million, we are saving a lot of money in recovery and response. This was so successful that a little more than a year ago, we turned around and started rolling it out to the defense industrial base. And I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Speaking of the defense industrial base, our primary collaboration environment is called the DICE. That's the DoD Defense Industrial Base Collaborative Information Sharing Environment. Yes, that's quite an acronym. Welcome to the Department of Defense. We pronounce it DICE. This is a cybersecurity engagement with over 1,300 defense contractors, most of them cleared and another portion of them non-cleared. Part of this is engaged through DoD CIO's DIB cybersecurity program, and then this includes a number of other capabilities that we have rolled out related to that. What is our primary function? Cyber threat analysis and information sharing. We are built on a partnership of sharing data with the DIB to help them defend themselves, and then receiving reports from the DIB that we're able to analyze, triage, and do further work with. Part of this is voluntary. DIB partners can report information to us on a voluntary basis. We will anonymize those reports and use the indicators of compromise to do further analysis to help defend both the DIB and the DoD. Part of this is mandatory. Many of us by now are familiar with DFARS 252.204-7012. I don't know how many of you out there have a favorite DFARS clause. I have one. So 252.204-7012, first of all, if anybody's tracking CMMC, that is where the security requirements for NIST 800-171 come from. And secondly, there's a requirement to report cyber incidents. So if you have a significant cyber incident that impacts controlled unclassified information, this clause requires you to report that incident. Those incidents come to us for analysis, triage, and response. That's what goes on in DICE. We are supported in a large part by our Operations Enablement Directorate. This is our crack squad of analysts. These are folks with connections to a variety of organizations across the government. They do very compelling all-source analysis and help us take our cyber threat data and make something incredibly powerful and enlightening out of it. Below that, we're supported by two other organizations. Our enterprise resource and management folks handle the money. They pay me on a routine basis, so I'm able to be here today. Strategy and partner engagement. We attempt to engage strategically and where we get high value and payoff. So thanks to them, I'm very happy to be with you today. This is the DC3 story in a nutshell. I'm going to focus on a couple of areas where, as I say, we've been able to enable cyber action. We are fundamentally a support organization. So we're not going to go conduct an operation. We are not going to go take out a bad guy. We are going to enable actions that inform decisions behind that. So let me focus for a bit here on the Defense Industrial Base Vulnerability Disclosure Program. Once again, we said, well, the DoD VDP seems like a runaway success. Would the DIB be interested in something like this? Again, for some decision makers, it's a little scary saying, hey, here is where I am on the internet. Come look and point out my vulnerabilities. Again, the adversary has already found them or is likely to already find them. In any case, what we did is we got together with DCSA, because between DCSA and DC3, we have tremendous outreach to the defense industrial base. And we have an ongoing collaborative partnership with DCSA. So we tried this out in a pilot in 2021 and 2022. Everyone was home because of COVID, or most of us were home because of COVID. We didn't know if the DIB would take interest in this. We planned for about 10 companies. We had 41 sign up. And we mitigated a variety of vulnerabilities across their infrastructure. It turned out to be pretty successful. And so in 2024, about a year ago, our executive director at the time took action and said, we've got to get this going for the DIB as an ongoing capability. So we reached back to DCSA. We looked at our resources, we put some plans together, and in the summer of 2024, we launched our full-time DIB VDP. As of March 31st, these numbers are actually a little bit higher, but as of March 31st, we've caught 723 vulnerabilities across about 50 DIB partners. 103 vulnerabilities have been completely closed out. Why does that matter? Well, if we report the vulnerability, we haven't solved the problem. If we've mitigated the vulnerability, we've solved the problem. And let me explain what happens here. The researcher finds the vulnerability and sends us a report along with a proof of concept. So we can look at it and say, okay, this is a legit report, this one maybe not so much. And these range from sort of very generic CWEs, a cross-site scripting vulnerability or weak authentication, and in some cases very specific, product-specific vulnerabilities, CVEs that are high risk. The researcher reports they have agreed not to penetrate any further into the system. We work with the company to figure out how to mitigate it. We can't quite do it for them, but we will advise them on patch this, change this configuration, go talk to your vendor about how to fix this. Once they report that they've closed it out, we go back to the researcher and ask them to try again, so that we're validating the TTP they used in the first place is no longer valid. And again, if it's not closed out, we will work with the company to keep closing it out. So we have, in 6 to 8 months, closed out 103 vulnerabilities. Again, $4.88 million per vulnerability. That's about $503 million that we have saved the industry and the government responding to cyber incidents. Now, that's a pretty big number, and you might be like, well, maybe not every one of those would have been attacked. Okay, fair. So 10% means we've still saved 50 million in a short time frame across the DIB. I think that's a pretty good number. I'm very proud of that team. On the right-hand side, by the way, is our March Might Bite. The VDP team puts together a monthly newsletter that highlights what we found, the severity of what's been found, what's been mitigated, and highlights our top research findings. These are available at dc3.mil, so you can look at each monthly report that we put out for the VDP. The DICE, the DoD DIB Collaboration Information Sharing Environment, once again, is founded on the concept of information sharing. This began in 2008. February 1st, 2008 was the first report from DICE. The employee who put that report out still works for us. We haven't let him go yet. The idea is the government has information for cyber defenses that need to be shared with industry. And industry would benefit from having that information to enable defense. This program began at that time as a collaboration between the government and really the prime contractors. And in 2008, that is where we needed to focus. So 16 companies total signed on in 2008. Within a couple of years, they hit about 100 or so and then kind of stayed there. When I arrived in 2017, the partnership was about 250, and today we're at 1,300. Now, that is a small percentage of the defense industrial base. Who knows how many companies are in the DIB? That's right, nobody actually knows. Maybe it's 80,000, maybe it's 100,000, maybe it's 200,000. It depends on how you define the DIB and how you want to measure it. It's a lot of companies. So 1,300 might seem like a small portion, But that's about 80% of the dollars spent in acquisition. So we're covering a large playing field, even if literally the number of companies is not so large. And the other thing we've come to realize is that a majority of those companies are small businesses, and that's changed how we do business within DICE. I'll get to that more in a moment. But again, we began with cyber threat reporting. That's our bread and butter. We're taking information from open source, we're taking information from government sources, and uniquely, we're getting reporting in from the DIB. So we analyzed our threat feed a couple of years ago, and one of our vendors helped us compare it to about 60 open source and commercial threat streams. What we are putting out to the DIB is 80% unique. This is information that is not available through the vendor of your choice. You can't buy this stuff. And this is the information we are bringing to bear. It's certainly not all the threat information you'll ever need, but it is a unique source of often very high severity threat data that we provide in terms of indicators, pumping out hundreds of indicators and thousands of indicators. In fact, lifetime for the program, over 740,000 indicators. Now, indicators age. They're not the only thing you look at in cyber defense, but in terms of sort of a day-to-day tactical activity, they're very powerful. We do these in lists, and we do them in more detailed reports. So, for example, we might put out a threat activity report that goes into great detail about a particular ransomware actor, or a particular APT, or particular TTPs that we have seen related to credential harvesting, for example. And those are available to our defense industrial base partners. I'm particularly proud in FY24 of the 46 alerts and the 133 tippers. Alerts are high priority warnings that we put out within 4 hours turnaround. So if we become aware of something that's about to hit the public, sometimes we're able to get ahead of that curve. Or if we see exploitation in the DIB, that becomes an alert. Right? There is a large set of known vulnerabilities out there. Not all of them have evidence of exploitation, but when we see it in the DIB, we let our partners know as soon as possible. The tippers are empowered by some of our high capability analytic tools, and the tippers are where we're warning individual companies of either suspected or pretty much confirmed malicious activity. So there have been tippers where we're aware, like, hey, you guys might need to look out. We're seeing some targeting in this area. And we've had tippers where we say, no kidding, we are seeing exfil from your network right now to a known bad location. How do we do that? One of our more powerful tools is DICE Cubed. Why do I call it DICE Cubed? Because I like to make people put a little superscript 3 in PowerPoint. See me after for a tutorial. This is a firewall log analysis capability that is currently surveying about 350 firewalls across the DIB voluntarily. Right? We're not looking at your stuff without your permission. And that analysis enables us to then match sets of information that we have on our side to look for exploited or potentially exploited environments. It also enables our partners to automatically block high severity threats. So we use information that's open source, and we use information within the government to rank the severity of a given threat. And you can choose to automatically block severity 9 or 8 and 9 or 7, 8, and 9. One more capability I'll mention down near the bottom there, once again, thanks to our XT and forensics experts. We have a malware portal where DIB partners can submit malware samples for analysis. Please don't email us malware. Please contact us for how to get to the portal. And within that, we have a number of capabilities, some of which are unique to DC3, built on our expertise over time to analyze malware and put out reports. So over the lifetime of this effort, we've done over 79,000 hours of forensic and malware analysis for the DIB. I talked about DICE Cubed. I'm going to mention that a little bit more in partnership with another capability we call nSight. We'll begin with nSight. nSight is a pilot for us, and about a year and a half ago, an organization in DoD came to us and asked us, would we like to try out censoring? And we said, sure, we would absolutely like to try that out. Let me explain for a moment. DICE Cubed, which I mentioned a little while ago, is looking at firewall logs. We're not on your network. We're not behind the firewall. We don't know anything that's going on the inside. Ensight, we're placing sensors in the network. And we have some physical sensors. We have some virtual sensors. And again, we're working in partnership with companies. So what do you get if you sign up for this? You get the benefit of real-time intelligence analysis. We are using some AI and ML tools in addition to human-based analysis. You get a dashboard where you see what we're seeing. Right? There's no secrets here. But most importantly, we have already in the first few months had a couple of major successes, and I want to talk about one of those that happened, no kidding, a few weeks ago. On a Friday afternoon, because that's how we do things. I'm sitting in my office, Government Friday, like it's been a week. 2 analysts come in and they're like, we need to get in touch with this company. Why is that? Well, we're seeing an APT, a known APT. We think they're setting up to deploy ransomware. I was like, yeah, we should call the company. So we did, and we sent them some information over the wire, and then we followed up with a more formal report the next week. But we got to them. They were able to validate that, yes, what we were seeing was in fact malicious activity, and they were able to block that activity. Now, this particular APT is known to deploy ransomware, demand ransoms up to $5 million. They have a habit of deploying stuff over the weekend so that when you come in, you have the worst Monday ever. And we caught them on the Friday afternoon. Not a bad success story. So we're very proud of that, and we are looking forward to getting more companies enrolled in Ensight and other capabilities. So that's Ensight on the network. What are you getting out of Dice Cubed? Out of Dice Cubed, you're getting firewall traffic, but what we're getting from that is a repository so that as new indicators are discovered, we get to go back over history and look for earlier instances where those might have been part of an exploitation. And so earlier this year, there was a series of activities that we were tracking, and from our government sources, we got a set of about 145 IP addresses. We worked through our Dice Cubed log and found evidence of nation-state intrusions on the organizations. We caught 24 DIB companies that had likely or confirmed hits. And so we got on the phone with them, we sent them reports, we got in touch with them. And I mean, we're very persistent about this. One of the CISOs in another instance talks about being in the dentist chair and already being in pain and then getting an alert on his phone from us and then adding to his pain. But again, we are able to catch the exfil in progress. The company was able to stop the exfil from completing. And that is how we are enabling cyber action within the DIB, and then using that information to inform defense industrial-based defenses as well. Some of that happens on the DoD, some of that happens at the programmatic level where a program owner might have to make decisions about how they are acquiring something based on the information that we've uncovered. The last example I have for you is another recent case which has to do with how we combat ransomware. All right, so in the news not too long ago was a press release from the Department of Justice talking about a ransomware group called Phobos, P-H-O-B-O-S. Now, as I said earlier, we are not the ones taking down the bad guys, but our unique capabilities in terms of analysis and our collaboration across the government enabled our U.S. government partners to then connect with a variety of foreign law enforcement agencies. You look at those symbols, most of them are European. There's only a couple of American agencies in there. And we were able to provide information that contributed to the effort that ultimately led into the Department of Justice arresting the administrator of the Phobos ransomware group and taking down the site. And that's the notice that they put up. We didn't plan on being the first logo up there, but that was awfully nice of them. So that's a really cool win for us. And again, all about sharing information, harnessing all of the entities we have at our disposal to enable cyber action. All right, what would I like you to take away from this? Once again, what's DC3? We're a federal cyber center. We're located in the Air Force. We have a DoD-wide vocation. What we do serves all of the services Fourth Estate, and everyone across the department. We are focused in cyber forensics, training, analysis, information sharing, vulnerability discovery, and capability development. I've brought to you the DIB VDP, an offshoot of the DoD VDP, where we are finding vulnerabilities and mitigating them to save cost for both the company and the DoD, as well as protecting the information the company has. We've talked about two monitoring capabilities, Nsight and Dice Cubed. On the one hand, censoring, on the other hand, firewall log analysis, both of which enable real-time analysis and detection of activity, and both of which have enabled blocking said activity. And finally, our ability to collaborate across the law enforcement community and the cybersecurity community has enabled them to take action to help protect the nation. With that, I thank you very much, and if you have questions, I'll ask you to kindly use the microphone there in the middle. Our sound guy already advised me he'd turn it way, way up so you can shout at me. It's early in the morning, I understand. If you do have questions for us, we'll be around. I'll be here. We have a number of DC3 folks. Oh, thank you, ma'am.
I mean, I just feel like somebody's got to stand up here. Come on, everybody else, come on up.
Thank you for breaking the ice.
So I have two hats. I'm going to talk to you about my Old Dominion University professor hat.
Okay.
Okay. I didn't come in right on time. I wanted to be here right at 8:15. But I try to tell the students, one day you're going to be combating ransomware, and you need to figure it out because the numbers only go higher. We see is increasing across the board, everything, right? So I just want to share with you the fact that you've said you're starting to combat ransomware. BZ, that's really great.
Thank you.
So a question for you, and I'm not sure if this is the right forum for this, and I talk about CVEs with the class. I know that kind of is originated through MITRE. Mm-hmm. And at one point, MITRE was being talked about as not having that ability to be that source anymore. How does that affect you? And are there other workings in place? Because that's an incredible collaboration. We use the CVEs in class. I explain where to find them. So when these students go off to their jobs, they know where to go. Mm-hmm. So could you talk to that at all, or are you not, is that kind of, what other sources would you use if MITRE ends up not being our source that we're all used to?
That's a great question, and I'm going to tap dance around it for a little while. Let's see. So first of all, to be clear, the MITRE contract that supports the CVE is a Department of Homeland Security contract. So as a representative for the Department of Defense, I don't have any insight into the mechanics behind it. As most of us are aware, that contract seemed like it was going to expire, and then at the last minute, it was renewed for about 11 months, I believe. Again, I only have publicly available information on this, and so there's a lot of community interest about figuring out how to preserve that effort in the event the government chooses not to fund it anymore. And I'm encouraged by that. MITRE has done a number of things which have set very useful standards for cyber threat analysis. Both the CVE database, the attack framework is something we use quite a lot in the analysis we do for our reports. And this is by no means not a MITRE plug. So I'll offer that I think the best thing to happen would be for a community of interest to take on that work, possibly through a nonprofit organization, whether that's one of the existing ISACs or whether that's a new body. I'll leave it to the world to figure out. But if you're depending on a government contract, look, all contracts end one day. Sorry, all contracts do end one day, and it's probably an awesome way to start something, but it may not be a way to guarantee longevity. So that would be my recommendation. I am not aware of any effort by the DoD to take that on. Yes, sir.
Yes, one of the big new changes in CMMC 2.0 is a recognition of a converged environment, IT, IoT, and OT. In fact, Layer 2 and Layer 3, for the first time, asked the DIB to actually account for any OT or IoT that gets exposed to CUI. How are you pivoting your mission to accommodate this new recognition at the department level?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. And I'll say for now, we're pivoting by opening our analysis and looking at threats to OT, primarily beginning with how they connect back to IT, right? So vulnerabilities to IT are still like the primary way in to an OT situation. And what we've done very recently is simply to change the content of our reporting to include OT-related indicators. I think you'll see some more things in the near future, but that'll be in coordination with the department.
Thank you.
Sure. Any of my DC3 colleagues want to weigh in? All right, once again, we'll be around the floor. Thank you all very much, and I hope you have a fantastic TechNet Cyber.